Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Tucker Tonight. I'm Brian Kilmeade. Unless you know differently, I'm going to be filling in for Tucker for the entire hour. Meanwhile, more and more Democrats are taking turns sticking a knife in the fallen Clinton dynasty, so to speak, as a wave of sexual harassment scandals engulfs Washington today. Even top liberals are taking their turns, putting a knife in Bill and Hillary Clinton for their handling of the former president's sex scandals. Here, for example, is what former HHS Secretary Kathleen Sebelius said to David Axelrod on his podcast.
Everyone in politics knew about his behavior, and we looked the other way, and I think there's a lot of soul searching to be done.
You bet, and that shouldn't happen ever again. Not only did people look the other way, but they went after the women who came forward and accused him.
Was that fair criticism of Hillary, that she participated in that effort?
Absolutely. I think it's very fair.
Now's the courage. Linda Tripp was at the center of the Monica Lewinsky scandal 2 decades ago. She says these new attacks on the Clintons are disingenuous political posturing. Tripp told the Weekly Standard this: it's $1 late, and actually the phrase is, it's a day late and $1 short. Joining us right now, a guy that never messes up a phrase, Mark Steyn. He's author and columnist and wonderful person. Mark, this is no revelation. This is a political opportunity for those on the left to suddenly stand up and act as if that they're above it all. Where were they when it was really took courage to stand up to the Clinton dynasty?
Yeah, they're basically doing it for political reasons. I mean, basically, this is the Clintons' Ceausescu moment. The apparatchiks underneath them have decided it's time to shuffle them off the rooftop into the helicopter, put them up against the wall, and then stick a couple of bullets in them. That's the moment they're facing. But the fact is that both Democrats and the media actually celebrated Clinton's behavior in the 1990s. It wasn't just that they trashed all those women. And it wasn't just that Gloria Steinem and other feminists, Gloria Steinem wrote the famous One Free Grope column for the New York Times, in which she said that the system worked. Bill Clinton had made an improper suggestion to Paula Jones and actually dropped his trousers, but that he took no for an answer. And so, as Gloria Steinem saw it, the system had in fact worked. But it went beyond that, in that a whole bunch of so-called liberal progressives celebrated Clinton's behavior. All kinds of famous feminists like Katie Roiphe and Nancy Friday and Erica Jong all said how pleased they were to have a man who, unlike those uptight Republicans, wasn't so sexually insecure that he needed to fire off rockets at every third world country on earth. They thought Clinton was sexy, and they thought his appetites made him sexy rather than a predator. It's been an extraordinary shift across 2 decades in their thinking about that.
It's amazing the way you can remember 1996 and 98. This is coming back to me as you say it. But do you also fault the American people in the Times? Because President Clinton left with a 60% approval rating. They said the Republicans overstepped. Newt Gingrich, it cost him his speakership. A lot of people who went after him looked so aggressive that it ended up boomeranging on Republicans. So the American people had a different mindset, too. Is that fair, Mark?
Well, no, I think a lot of the American people just didn't want to hear about it. They didn't want to. I mean, there were a lot of phrases in the air that I think carefully about bringing up. And people didn't
what
actually
the meaning of
want
is, and what type, what is, and we don't want to fill in the gaps necessarily there, but that permeated through the primary school system.
That's right. And I think a lot of people just actually wanted to put their hands over their ears and say, no, I can't hear you. And I think the Democrats, in that sense, the lesson learned was that if you brazen it out, you will succeed. And that brazening had consequences all the way to last year's election. Because the only reason Hillary Clinton was a presidential candidate is because of the deal she did with Bill Clinton in 1998 and 1999, that if she didn't do what most self-respecting women would do and walk out on that guy, there would be a reward for her in the shape of a Senate seat in a state she'd never lived in, which led to her becoming Secretary of State, which led to her becoming presidential nominee. But the fact of the matter is that feminists threw away 40 years of hard work by standing by Bill Clinton. There was the famous Nina Burley line in that she'd gladly perform various services on him in exchange for keeping abortion legal. In other words, to the liberal progressives, 20 years ago, the end justified the pants dropping. And you can't blame Harvey Weinstein and Al Franken and all the other guys for learning the lesson of that.
Right. I think it's ends justifies the means, but the pants, I see the insertion there. So, Mark.
Yeah, I got that phrase wrong just like you did at the top of the hour,
All right,
Brian.
listen, you don't have to keep bringing up my mistakes. I'm probably not going to make another one until at least 2020. Mark, so let's game plan this out. Hillary Clinton's not going anywhere. And Philip Reines, the longtime aide, went back at Kristen Gillibrand, the senator who really looked at Hillary Clinton as a mentor. She took Hillary Clinton's seat. When she called out Hillary Clinton, Philip Reines went back. So the Clinton camp went back at those attacking her. Are we going to see a Democratic civil war? And then who will be left standing at the end?
Well, it's not going to be the Clintons. I mean, you know, basically, I said it was the Ceausescu moment. If they're not actually going to be put up against the wall, it's something closer to like Robert Mugabe in Zimbabwe. There's like a little period of uncertainty, but basically people are figuring out that the future does not lie with these two people. When you had the big 25th anniversary party just last week, the fact of the matter is that that's the only relevance that Bill Clinton has to today's politics is the fact that there is that suddenly sexual harassment has actually become a burning topic in Washington and in Hollywood and even at PBS. And the fact of the matter is that he got away with it because he was brazen. Most people would have slunk out of public life in shame. And if you're wondering why Charlie Rose is walking around naked, when you have a president in the Oval Office who is a serial predator, why shouldn't some schlub of a host at PBS think he can get away with it too?
Wow, that's a huge leap because Bill Clinton had his transgressions. Charlie Rose dropped his pants. That's what I'm going to leave Mark Stein with on the Friday edition of Tucker Tonight. Mark, either you were very quiet during Thanksgiving and this is you opening up your spleen for us, or everyone was eviscerated at your table at the Stein house on Thanksgiving.
No, sorry. I'm a fortnight late and a farthing short, Brian. I think that's the phrase you were looking for.
All right. Hey, enough phrases for today. Mark Stein, for the power vested in me, you can go about your weekend now. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, coming up. It's not just the Clintons, of course. More attacks continue to be levied against the powerful in show business and in politics. Yesterday, Uma Thurman of Kill Bill fame made this aggressive Instagram post. Quote, "Happy Thanksgiving, everyone, except you, Harvey Weinstein, and all your wicked conspirators. I'm glad it's going slowly. You don't deserve a bullet." Man. Meanwhile, Senator Al Franken has released a new apology after two more women came forward to accuse him of groping and inappropriate overall behavior. Franken says this quote, and tell me if this is okay with you. I feel terribly that I've made some women feel badly, and added, "I'm a warm person. I hug people." Meanwhile, in the House, Democratic Congressman Kathleen Rice repeated her demand that colleague John Conyers, who's been serving since 1964, resign.
Conyers says it didn't happen. You say he should resign. Why?
Because enough is enough. At this point, what I am voicing publicly is what every single private citizen is saying across America. Why are the rules for politicians in Washington different than they are for everyone else?
They say innocent until proven guilty. Sure, the court of public opinion, pressure, private entities, they can make people do different things with different pressure points. But what do you make of that pushback?
We don't have any legal standard here. We are talking about the court of public opinion. We're talking about holding men accountable for their actions.
Meanwhile, more allegations coming out on him. Joining us now, Congressman Ron DeSantis. He's seen enough. He's a Republican representative in Florida, and he's moving on legislation to stop the payout of would-be lawmakers without us even knowing about it. Now, Congressman DeSantis, before we talk specifically about what bothers you and where we go from here, what are you proposing they take up in Washington when they get back to work?
Well, in terms of this issue, I mean, I think all of these settlements need to be made public. The American taxpayer has a right to know how their tax dollars are being used. If that money is being used to pay from a slush fund for misconduct of members of Congress or congressional staff, harassment charges, they need to know about it. We need to know how much was paid, who was it paid to, and who was the culprit. That is just, to me, a bare minimum.
So Conyers evidently took money out of his own coffers to pay it, but not his own pocket. But you're talking about a fund that almost nobody knew about, it seems, even on Capitol Hill, that had $17 million in payouts, 264 settlements in total over the last 20 years. That reported by the Washington Post. Now, not all of this was harassment, sexual harassment or sexual misconduct. But we didn't even know about this, and it's our money.
Exactly. And I think that that's right, Brian. I think a lot of these claims will be things like disability, age discrimination. There will be harassment claims, and the American people have a right to know all of that. And I think going forward, though, you have to deal with that fund, make it public, defund it going forward for any misconduct. But I do think you need a Conyers rule that would prevent a member of Congress for doing what he's purportedly did, which was effectively pay a settlement from his office budget. We all members, we get office budgets. The purpose of that office budget is to represent our constituents, not to pay settlements from misconduct. So I think that needs to be barred as well. And then I think any member who committed misconduct, right, if they had this public money paid, I think the member should be on the hook for that. I think they should have to reimburse the taxpayer with interest. That is a fair thing to ask.
Congressman, what do you think about what Kathleen Rice, the Democratic Congresswoman from New York, said he needs to resign? Do you feel the same way?
Well, I think if we do the transparency, then we'll get all the facts on this. Well, from what I've read, I think that that clearly is unacceptable conduct for somebody to be serving in Congress with. But I will tell you this, Brian, this issue is one of a lot of problems when you have people that have served in Congress for 50 years like he has. I think this is a great example of why we need term limits in Congress in addition to these other reforms.
And the latest accusation comes from Melanie Sloan. She's a lawyer with Conyers on the Judiciary, working with Conyers on the Judiciary Committee. She says that she was called up to his place where he was walking around in his underwear. That is a third person to walk around. Made her increasingly anxious going to work every day. He was actually rude to her as well. So Conyers has a pattern of behavior that was kept quiet for years. I never even heard this whispered. Did you know about some of these things, the way he treated many of the people that work for him?
No, I mean, I didn't. I would really not have a reason to. I didn't necessarily travel in his circles. My understanding, though, is as this stuff has come out, that there's a lot of people who will now say, hey, we've heard some of this stuff. A lot of it's at the staff level because you have a lot of staff for him that were allegedly mistreated. And so that's not the way you're supposed to run your office. But I think what you're going to see now, if we can get this stuff made public, you're going to see a lot of stuff come out, Brian. But you know what? We need the truth on all of this.
Yeah, and so far leadership says they didn't know anything about it. And if you get the money, in some of these cases $27,000, you're also told you take the money, you got to keep your mouth shut. This way, nobody ever finds out about it. Congressman Ron DeSantis, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, coming up straight ahead, the Russia investigation. We're going to talk about it. There are new signs that Lieutenant General Michael Flynn could try to turn against President Trump. Or are those signs being misread? We'll discuss it next. All right, former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn was one of Donald Trump's earliest political supporters, but he could be breaking with the president as his legal trouble deepens, and so does his son's. New reports today say that the general's legal team has stopped sharing information with President Trump's legal team, suggesting to some that the general could be cooperating with special counsel Robert Mueller. After all, he hasn't been indicted yet, and there's some things out there that could get him in legal trouble. Jonathan Turley's a law professor at Georgetown University Law School and was so intrigued by this, and he needed to talk to me so much, he scrambled to be on the Friday after Thanksgiving. So if, everybody is playing armchair legal scholar. Tell me what this means to you, Jonathan.
Well, you know, this is not unexpected from the outset. Soon after Mueller was appointed, it was really all about Flynn, in my view. I raised his name first as the most obvious target of a prosecutor. He has a number of the elements that targets share. He has a clear, credible criminal allegation. That is his failure to register under FARA. He accepted $500,000 from the nation of Turkey. Now, those FARA violations, which is the registration as a foreign agent, are almost never prosecuted. But that doesn't mean they can't be prosecuted. But then the narrative deepened when an allegation came out that he attended 2 meetings, including one after the election, in which they discussed the kidnapping of a Turkish dissident living in the United States. So things have only gone from bad to worse for Flynn. And then the final thing was when it was clear that his son is in the mix here. And prosecutors will often look at family members as a way of coercing a plea.
So a couple of things. I got to know General Flynn a little bit for about 18 months. He was a regular on our couch even before he jumped on with Donald Trump. He had his book out, Field of Fight. There's nothing indicating in his background that he looked at the Russians as anything but an enemy. In fact, he says, although I believe America and Russia could find mutual ground fighting radical Islamists, there's no reason to believe that Putin would welcome cooperation with the U.S. Quite the contrary, and goes on about that. So I have this highlighted in the book because it makes no sense in Lieutenant General Michael Flynn's background to think that he would try to bring President Trump to Russia. Does that make a difference in your world?
Well, it does. I mean, there are some connections with Russia. There was a dinner with Putin, but that was before the election. Most of the stuff with Flynn is not related to the Russians and doesn't appear related to the election. Now, we don't know what Mueller has, but most of it goes to his relationship with Turkey and the possibility that he was a foreign agent even late into the process after the election. But people need to be careful not to get ahead of their skis here. There are various reasons. I do criminal defense work. There's various reasons why you would draw from this type of agreement. One is if you even start negotiations with the prosecutor, you will normally withdraw because that creates a conflict. That doesn't mean that you're going to cooperate. Mueller's going to want deliverables. It's got to be someone higher up that in order to get a real plea agreement from Mueller. That doesn't necessarily mean it's Trump. It could be someone like Manafort. It could be other people. But it also could mean that they don't reach an agreement. So people need to sort of take a breath here. We don't know a lot.
That's why it's so great to have you here, because you have a level head to all this. I also thought it was important, too. Our correspondent says, our intelligence says, not only was Trump's team told that Flynn will not be talking to them or cooperating, other teams were, too. So anybody, anything to do with the investigation was told by the Flynn camp, we're not going to be talking to you again. Now, Jonathan, so I just wanted to bring that up to round it out. But here's the other thing. I'm just wondering, in the big picture, if somebody like Mueller would ever give Flynn a deal or start negotiating if he didn't know what he was capable of giving up. Does he really not know? Is there a chance that Mike Flynn has nothing to give to Mueller and Mueller just needs to find that out, or does Mueller know?
Well, usually before you get into serious negotiations, you'll put forward a thing called a proffer, or you'll give some type of informal understanding that you have something to offer. Now, proffers are usually for an immunity agreement, but you do the same type of thing in saying, I do have deliverables here. But it is possible that Mueller doesn't really have a good idea of what he could offer. What is clear is that he was involved in a couple of the meetings that Mueller is pursuing. But this is very early to assume he's got something significant for us or for Mueller. But frankly, he's always been the target that some of us have been wondering about. And when Manafort was indicted on FARA violations, all of us were thinking not of Manafort but Flynn. Because you have to read that indictment and say, but for the grace of God go I, if you are General Flynn.
I remember you saying that. You were surprised Flynn wasn't first or right after. There must be something going on. Professor Jonathan Turley, thanks so much.
Thanks, Brian.
All right, coming up straight ahead. Even the Thanksgiving holiday couldn't bring about a ceasefire between President Trump and the National Football League. We'll tell you about their latest battle and one owner who is thankful the president weighed in. Don't go away. All right, the NFL has a long tradition of playing on Thanksgiving, as you know. But yesterday, the tradition turned into controversy when New York Giants defensive end Olivier Vernon knelt for the national anthem. You're looking at him. The protest provoked the rage of President Trump, who tweeted this: "Can you believe that the disrespect for our country continues? Our flag, our anthem continues without penalty to the players. The commissioner has lost control of the hemorrhaging league. They've lost about 1 million fans. Players are the boss." Meanwhile, unsigned quarterback Colin Kaepernick celebrated, quote, "unthanksgiving" at Alcatraz Island.
Our fight is the same fight. We're all fighting for our justice, for our freedom. And realizing that we're in this fight together makes us all the more powerful.
And that's where Native Americans had taken over years ago, and they want to mark that as the un-Thanksgiving. Colin Kaepernick was free on Thanksgiving to do that. Burgess Owens, a former NFL player for the Raiders, outstanding one for the Jets and Raiders, joins us right now. Burgess, your reaction to the one man taking a knee while a military member sang the national anthem?
Well, you know, we have so many places to start here. Let me start off. I'm so glad that President Trump drew a line so we have this conversation we're having right now, because there's so much information that needs to get to these youngsters. First is this: the young man we're talking about that's taking a knee, he's making $54 million guaranteed. So what I would suggest people like that doing is make sure those youngsters that are coming behind him realize that there is many ways that you can make in this country by overcoming and giving back. So at the end of the day, we just need to take this time we'll talk about it, be thankful, start counting our blessings, and particularly black men need to teach our kids that this country lives us every chance we can to overcome and be the best we can be, which is being shown by the millionaires we have across this country.
Burgess, he said, I took a knee because of the racial inequality in our country and because of police brutality. It doesn't end just because it's a tribute to, by the way, on the weekend was a tribute to veterans over the series of a week. Of the last few weeks, even though Michael Bennett said because he wanted to make sure the military knows they weren't showing a slight to them. Is the message getting muddled?
Well, there's no message from the other side other than social justice, and I'm not really sure what that means. Economic justice is where you start the process, and these young men have a chance now. They're making millions of dollars. They can go back and talk about work ethic, get their kids educated, get jobs. How about this? How about starting businesses and have some of these youngsters that are unemployed working now? There are so many ways. The social injustice is something that's being pumped into the black community that is basically we just have to get past and recognize that there's ways we can work our way out of it by free enterprise and capitalism. That's where we get started with that.
Burgess, is much different in your day. I remember Terry Bradshaw was the premier quarterback. He said he never made over $200,000, and he was rare. You guys had to have jobs in the off season. You had to do something else. Have they lost that common man? They have a unique skill and work hard. I get that. A lot more money's in the league. I get that. But have they lost that common man experience?
There's a lot that came out of that generation because of the generation that we had before us, that taught us to appreciate, to go and work. How about this, Brian? At the time I was coming through, we didn't have black quarterbacks, we didn't have black centers, middle linebackers, because that was the timing of that day. Now we have opportunities across the board. And the biggest part in those days, we did have to work in all season, so we actually cared about our character because we realized we had the vision to know that we had to make sure we made a positive impact so when the same game was done with, we can go out and get a job. There's so many things that's been turned around, and we just need to, first of all, learn to man up. Stop complaining and whining, and just don't throw money at the problem. If you want to make a difference, roll up your sleeves during the off season and get something done. Teach these kids to appreciate our country and opportunity and work hard to make their lives different.
I want you to hear what Jerry Jones said, the Dallas Cowboy owner. Much different take than others, including the commissioner. Listen.
Donald Trump is a longtime fan of sport and a longtime fan of football, and has been involved as owner in professional football. So he has some knowledge. I certainly think that the thing that he is addressing is certainly a part of how we want to make our game better. This is all a part of what I've been talking about with the commissioner, and certainly I appreciate not only the president, but I want everybody to be a fan of the Dallas Cowboys.
All right, the Cowboy thing aside, because it's hard for a Giant fan to be a fan of the Cowboys, Jones is speaking out.
Well, what we have here is a difference in builders and managers. The commissioner is a manager. Jones and Donald Trump, President Trump, Pete Rozelle, these were builders. What I suggest is this, very simply. If I can give the commissioner some advice, why don't he do very simply, take the advice of builders, people who've made tremendous amounts of income, take the advice, learn how to rebuild the brand, and put aside ego, put aside all the other politics, and rebuild the company he was given charge to take care of. We need to get back to the basics. We really understood and appreciated the NFL for what it was, what it represented.
Right. You guys got to get better medical benefits. That would be a real salute to previous generations like yours. Burgess Owens, thanks so much.
Happy Thanksgiving, Brian. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right, ready for a turn? Let's do it. A few days after the remarkable escape of a North Korean soldier across the border into South Korea, North Korea is digging in, literally. You got a new trench line that's being dug at the exact point where the border was, where the soldier escaped. Meanwhile, almost all the soldiers present when the man defected have reportedly been replaced, with the fate of those soldiers unclear, likely not good. Gordon Chang is a North Korean expert and author of Nuclear Showdown, and joins us also a book on China, Coming Collapse of China. Gordon, your reaction to that video, that isn't just video that is going to go into the woodwork and into the closet, is it? This could have major impact.
Well, it certainly could. This is the first time that the American-led UN command has released the video of a defector coming across the DMZ. This video is not going to stay outside of North Korea. Someone's going to bring it in on a DVD smuggled across the Chinese border, maybe some other way. This could actually undermine the regime of Kim Jong-un because it shows people actually defying the Kim regime and getting away with it.
His gut was riddled with parasites as well as bullets. He was remarkably malnourished. Almost everybody that we've gotten from North Korea, where they escaped or were captured or their submarine had washed up and we did an autopsy, they're riddled with all these horrible diseases. How bad is the malnutrition over the north side of the border?
Well, it's obviously worse than we thought it was, because these soldiers in the joint security area where this defector fled is the best soldiers of the best. Because they have to be, because of the political ramifications, such as we saw with this defector leaving. It's going to reverberate throughout the entire North Korean military. What it says is that the drought, which is the worst since 2001, is having a bigger effect on agriculture than analysts thought.
We're getting his story. He was an orphan his entire life. They talk about kids having, it's horrible, to go through animal feces in order to see if there's anything there they can eat. When they pull lice out of their hair, they squeeze the blood out and then eat the actual bugs. Is there a chance, instead of looking at how to stop them on the outside, is there a chance they might collapse from the inside? And what can we do to expedite that?
Yeah, one thing we can do is to get information inside of North Korea. You know, the Kim family, Kim Il-sung, who founded the regime, created a cult, and he sealed it off from the rest of the world so people would actually believe, you know, the regime's doctrine, its thoughts, its lies, all of it together. Once you pierce that, then you have people leaving. And that's why there have been defectors, because they understand what's going on outside the world, that there is another Korea, South Korea, which is prosperous.
During war, we drop flyers and pamphlets. We can't really do that. They'll get shot out of the sky. Is there something else we could do? Because they have to know these people have to know they're in hell, don't they?
Well, South Korean dissidents actually take balloons and they float them over the DMZ. They've got money in them. They got DVDs. They got all sorts of things to tell the people of North Korea that life is much better outside. And that's the way you're going to destabilize the regime. Now, we haven't done that for various reasons, but clearly, if we're going to solve this problem peacefully, it's going to be without Kim Jong-un and his regime.
The Russians spoke out about the president's decision to put them back on a terror list, the list of terrorist nations, and of course they never should have left. They said this: another scaremongering act and PR move. This can end with a big catastrophe of global scale. So they're critical of the president for making that move. What's your reaction?
I think it's a very good move, because with the designation being back on the list of state sponsors of terrorism come sanctions. Now, none of these sanctions are big in and of themselves, but at this point, every turn of the screw can make a difference. And we saw this because there's additional sanctions that President Trump put on North Korea on Tuesday. Those Treasury Department sanctions, 1 individual, 13 entities, 20 vessels. Those vessels were carrying oil. Some of those vessels probably also carry weapons. That's absolutely prohibited by UN rules. We need to enforce those rules, because if we do that, we can cut off the flow of money to Kim.
Lastly, you spend a lot of time, you go to South Korea, you do a lot of research. You seem heartened that we finally might be able to solve this anemic problem, this tumor on the planet. Are you feeling like this is all about to come to a head?
Well, I think it'll come to a head in about 9 months, because then President Trump's campaign to cut off money is actually going to have even more effect than it does now. And also in 9 months, Brian, I think Kim Jong-un is going to become confident in his arsenal, that he'll be able to hold us to ransom. You put those two things together, it means that next year is going to be consequential.
We got to convince China that that's unacceptable, and Russia as well. Hopefully the president did that in his conversation with Vladimir Putin a couple of days ago. Thanks so much, Gordon Chang.
Thanks, Brian.
24 minutes before the top of the hour. Now this. Are Europeans losing the will to live? Tucker will be back after the break to discuss about the rise of euthanasia in Europe. I'm serious. Take a wide shot. Sports. All right, euthanasia is still rare in the United States, but it's increasingly common in Europe. Tucker Carlson recently sat down with attorney Robert Clark to discuss the state of assisted suicide in the old heart of Western civilization.
Mr. Clark, thanks for joining us. You represent Tom Mortier. Explain to an American audience not as familiar with euthanasia as practiced in Europe, his experience with European euthanasia laws.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Tom Mortier is a man who lives in Belgium, and he found out that his 64-year-old mother, who was physically healthy, she had no physical condition, he found out that she'd been euthanized the day after it happened, when the hospital phoned up his wife to ask them to come in and make the necessary arrangements. This isn't the day before it happened, it's not the day it happened, but the day after he gets this phone call to ask him to come and make the necessary arrangements.
And what was his response to this?
Well, he, as you can imagine, like any son, was devastated. I mean, this is a man who hadn't really given a huge amount of thought to the euthanasia laws that are in force in Belgium before this happened. And his experience through all of this has turned him into someone who is willing to stand up in the difficult environment that it is in Belgium and say something is very, very wrong here when we decide that instead of caring for our sick, instead of caring for the vulnerable people that we have in society, we're going to offer death to them.
How common is it in Europe?
It's getting more common, and this is one of the frightening things. So I know there are some US states that are considering this, and I just encourage them to look at the experience in Europe. So we've got a couple of countries. Let's take Belgium as an example. And whenever euthanasia has been legalized, we've seen two things happen. So the first thing is we see the number of cases going up every single year. And so the cases started relatively low in Belgium until we've now reached the point where, according to the official government statistics, more than 5 people per day are euthanized in Belgium. And so these stories that you hear, the arguments that you hear that say, well, this is an exceptional thing, this is a rare thing, it's not true. And that's the first big problem that we see, that wherever euthanasia is legalized, that the numbers go up. And then secondly, the categories of people that can access euthanasia start to expand. People start to kind of push on the edges. Those that originally said, well, this is going to be really, really rare, start pushing out. So again, let's go back to Belgium and see what actually has happened. So 2014, Belgium extended its law to allow child euthanasia, so there is no lower age limit in Belgium at all. A child, as long as they understand, whatever that means, that what's happening to them, can choose to be euthanized. And then most recently I saw a proposal in the Netherlands for people who are just tired of life. So no physical condition, no mental condition, just people who are tired of life. And so this is what's really sinister here, because you see a law that people argue for as an exception, but that is never what it becomes, and you can see that pattern wherever euthanasia has been legalized.
So a particularly sinister element of this is the economic part of it. So it's obviously much cheaper to kill people than to treat them, either for their diseases or their depression. So isn't there a built-in incentive on the part of the state that is providing health care to do this because of the cost savings?
Well, absolutely. I mean, you and I both come from places that have an aging population. People are getting older. And a very, very real concern is this so-called right to die that people talk about, that doesn't exist in international law. This right to die actually very quickly becomes a duty to die. And so you've got vulnerable people that we should be caring for, who are going to start to feel maybe an implicit pressure, maybe just they feel they're a burden in terms of money, or a burden in terms of time, but maybe then explicit pressure as well. So cases where people have been told that they're a burden, that maybe their family members can't help them anymore, can't sustain them in their caring requirements. And so, yeah, there's a very, very real concern here that once you start to crack that door open, that it leads to vulnerable people feeling very, very real pressure.
Have health insurers taken a position on this? Have they admitted that they're for it?
So, I mean, the system of medicine is a little bit different in most European countries.
Yes.
But certainly, if you look, for example, in the UK at some of the groups that have been involved in this discussion, so the UK Parliament very recently debated this issue and overwhelmingly rejected a bill that would have legalised assisted suicide, as they called it, in the United Kingdom. And every major, for example, disability rights group was against that bill because they recognise the burden and the threat that that's going to place on some of their members, people who are vulnerable, people who are elderly. And then take, for example, the doctors. The World Medical Association has consistently said that euthanasia is inherently unethical. It's not something that should be promoted because governments have an obligation to protect life, not to promote or to assist in death. And yet that's exactly what we're seeing happening in these European countries.
And we're going to see more of it as the costs go up. Thank you very much, Robert. I appreciate that report from Europe.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
I don't appreciate it. I'm more so depressed now. Everyone's killing themselves. Meanwhile, back in America, next, how will the Trump economy impact this year's holiday shopping season? Quite a few brawls on Black Friday. Back in a moment. Today was Black Friday. It's almost over, which is the day America engages in one of its most embarrassing traditions, stampeding and fighting to take possession of commercial trinkets. Here's some video of the mayhem.
Stop! Let go! Let go! You're breaking it.
That is the Christmas spirit, isn't it? Not all stores look like that, though. Some places were really doing well. The economy's humming after all. There was a lot of reasonable people out there shopping. Some consumers and retailers were kind of happy with what they saw this holiday season as it officially kicks off. Heather Herzog is a retail analyst and joins us right now. Heather, are you a little embarrassed by the fighting, although it's not unusual?
I saw this video, and I mean, well, I was sitting here, but when I was out last night, and I have to tell you, I've been up for almost 26 hours now. When I was out at Walmart and a lot of the other stores, I didn't see anything like this. Everyone was very calm, very orderly. There was very little store traffic in many of the stores that I visited. So I think that from what I saw, especially, I mean, I didn't transport myself to the middle of the country or the West Coast, but from the stores that I saw on the Eastern Seaboard, people were very calm.
The worst brawl seemed to be Alabama. They say more than 6,000 stores have closed so far in 2017, most of any year on record, and 65,000 fewer retail jobs in America. When will this trend continue, or is this as bad as it's going to get?
You know, I think every year you see retailers shutting their doors. This isn't a trend in retail that's uncommon. And you also see a lot of those seasonal jobs going away. That's never a good thing. But what is going to happen is that you're going to see a lot of these traditional brick and mortar encompass online. So while you have the Amazons, a lot of these brick and mortar stores are trying to compete with the juggernaut of Amazon. So these traditional jobs that you saw in retail are now going to move online.
Right. And I guess it can hurt communities, small and large, because the taxes are not coming out. If I have a store down the block, I'm paying taxes on that. If I'm in Amazon somewhere in the West Coast and I'm buying something in New York's not getting those tax dollars, right?
No, they're not. But, you know, now that you're seeing Amazon move to different cities and you're going to have different fulfillment centers, you are going to have other jobs within those local fulfillment centers to be had. So that community, ostensibly, I think the idea is for it to be preserved.
Right. I know a lot of people aren't happy with the prices either. I know in Walmart they are not happy with it being paid. And I know there was a strike in Europe at Amazon because they're not happy with it being paid. So the wages have to go up to make these jobs likable.
Definitely. But I did speak to some Walmart employees yesterday, especially because they were working on Thanksgiving. And you want to know, why are you there? And a lot of them seem very happy to be there. In fact, they were getting paid. They were saying that, and I didn't coerce them into saying this, they said that they were being paid a fair wage.
Gotcha.
In fact, they were happy to be there.
Heather Herzog, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Get some rest.
Okay.
All right, back to wrap things up in just a moment. right, this story should get you into the holiday spirit once and for all. Kate McClure was in trouble when she ran out of gas on Interstate 95, didn't have any money to pay for it. Johnny Bobbitt Jr., a homeless Marine Corps veteran who sat near the highway, helped her by spending $20 and going to get the gas himself for her. Now McClure and her boyfriend are repaying Bobbitt by starting a new GoFundMe page on his behalf. So far it has raised, get this, more than $300,000. And thanks to that money, Bobbitt is off the street and plotting out how to rebuild his life.
As of right now, we have that much.
I can't get there.
$1,760.
That changes my life right there.
$1,764.
That changes my life. The $769 changes my life.
Nice. Bobbitt hopes to use his good fortune to pay forward one day. Meanwhile, that's it for us tonight. Tucker will be back on Monday night at 8 o'clock. If you see him in the street, please tell him he has to work on Monday. I'll see you on Fox and Friends on the Brian Kilmeade radio show from 9 to noon. And be sure to check out my brand new book, Andrew Jackson, The Miracle of New Orleans. If you can't see me in person, go to briankilmeade.com and get it signed at my local bookstore and get it personalized right to you. Good night. I saw her in the hall, Kimberly Guilfoyle, filling in for Sean Hannity tonight. They look a lot different, but we'll be talking everything about what you care most about. Make it a great Friday and a sensational weekend.